Deploying a website used to be tricky. Now with all the built-in help, deploying your .NET website to a local web server or to the cloud can be done in minutes. Today, I'm going to show you the options you have for deploying a full .NET website. We will cover deploying to a local or remote IIS server, as well as to Windows Azure. Since .NET Core is a bit different, I'll be covering the deployment options for it in a separate video. Not to worry though, the techniques in this video will also work for .NET Core. There's just more options available to it compared to the full .NET framework. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. This channel is full of videos explaining the various parts of C#. I also have a website where I provide full courses on C# and SQL. You can check it out at imtimcorey.com. That is also where a blog post for this video is located. It includes the source code for my sample application at the start of this video. Now, I'm not including the source code for the end of this video because the only thing that really changes is the publication information, and that information I have to redact anyways. Also note that in the description below, you can find links to join my mailing list or to support me on Patreon. Okay, let's get started in our example project. What I have set up here is a basic ASP.NET MVC website. It's practically the default template. I just made a couple of modifications to make it mine. So let's run it first to see how it looks locally. Okay, here we go. So this is my website. Like I said, it's mostly the sample app. I just changed this stuff right here. And also if you click this, it goes to imtimcorey.com. Okay, so that's all I really did. And it also says imtimcorey.com down here. Now what we want to do is not concentrate on the MVC side, but instead on how we can deploy our application. Now honestly, if I run this one more time, let's do that. And I'll leave it off a screen, but there's a tool that starts in the background that you may not even notice. If next to the clock you open up the icons there, you should find one that looks kind of silvery. And if you right click on it and say show all applications, this is what you get. Now mine is off a screen, sorry. That's not my recording screen, so I couldn't really show you that. But this is IIS Express. If you're familiar with IIS, or Internet Information Services, which is what the web server that powers our servers, our Windows servers, this is essentially I hate to call it little brother because it's actually almost full featured. You can do most of what you can in IIS, but in IIS Express. The biggest differences are the UI isn't nearly as comprehensive, and it really is focused on just running it locally, but you can get in there and tweak the settings to run it for your whole network if you wanted to. Don't run production apps in this, but if you want to share it with a friend who you're debugging with, that's great. You can do that. So here I have my web demo. If I right click on it, you can say stop, browse, or you can put these in groups if you have more than one application running at a time. There's a path to where it is and the config file for configuring the website. And that's an IIS configuration. So right now we've already essentially deployed it to our local machine. I know it doesn't feel like we've done anything, but the reality is we're pretty much there. So let's go ahead and close this out and hit stop, which by the way also stops the IIS Express website. But now let's look at our deployment options. If I right click on my project and say publish, it gives me some options. App services, which is an Azure virtual machine, which the difference here is this Azure virtual machine is a full web server essentially that you control. Everything from installing Windows on it and all the rest. Whereas app service, you just have the website and a GUI to configure it. So it's not even configuring IIS, it's just the website itself. So there's the two Azure options. Then we have IIS and we have folder. Now for today's demo, we're going to do the top one, app service, and the bottom one, folder. Now you'd think we're going to do the IIS, and we could, and that can either use web deploy or file transfer using FTP. But really this is the same thing, only we get to see what the process is instead of something else doing it for us. So we're going to start with this folder deploy, and it's actually going to deploy in our bin directory in the release folder, and it's the publish option. So that's it. We hit publish. It's going to build. It's going to take a couple of minutes to build everything up. Well, it's actually done. And now we're done. So if I now right click on web demo, say open folder in file explorer. There we go. Go to bin directory and now go to release and publish. There's the website. So that's all we need for a website. Now let's bring it off a screen for a minute and let's bring on, I'm going to bring on the control panel. So if you open up your control panel and you go to, it's easiest to just go to uninstall a program. Click that. Don't actually uninstall a program. Go to turn Windows features on or off. Now I'm on Windows 10. So if I click that, it brings up this box here. Now I've already got it installed, but I want to show you what I did. Internet Information Services. I clicked that box, but I added a few options. Under Worldwide Web Services, Application Development Features, I checked the box for ASP.NET 4.7. Now yours may be a little bit different. It may be a little bit older version. Maybe it's 4.6 or 4.5. That's fine. Whatever you're publishing in, that's okay. And if you're going to publish really old websites, maybe web forms, then you'd want to check ASP.NET 3.5 as well. But the 4.x, whatever that is, on your machine is fine. Okay? And then also, I checked a few others in here. You can look at which ones I checked, but HTTP redirection, static content, errors, directory browsing, and default documents. And then HTTP logging and tracing. Both of the features under performance features. And finally, for security, request filtering is all I have checked. So that's how I've got mine configured. You can add or subtract things and play around that as you feel like you want to. But that's where I started off with my IIS. And this is on my machine. So we're not going to go to a server today and install it there, but this is the exact same way you could install on a server. So now that I've got IIS configured, and if you made changes, hit OK, it's going to configure it. It'll take a few minutes to install on your machine, and then you can run it. When you do, open up IIS Server, Internet Information Services. So this is IIS Manager. And here I have a default site, which I've already played around with. Let's create a new site so you can see that from start to finish. Right-click on Sites, Add Website. Again, same process on a server. Let's call this Web Demo. The path, we're going to go to C, temp, demos, web deploy demo, which actually already has content. So we're going to clean that content out. And we'll say HTTP, that's fine. And start website immediately. Actually, let's put this on a different port. Let's put it on port 8080. Okay, so now we have our website. Let's go browse that. And I'll just go ahead and, this is my demo, making sure it's going to work. So we've got now cleaned it out. If we were to go to that site, nothing would happen. It wouldn't work. In fact, if you go here to browse port 8080, it opens it up and we get this error right here. So now let's bring in our content from our application. So there's a folder we're going to. Now let's go to the folder that we have our data in, which I can bring down from here. This the bin release publish folder. So if I were to right click, drag over, and say copy, that's it. Close that down, close that down. Let's bring our website back down and hit refresh. Let's wait for it for a minute. Might take a couple seconds to start the first time because it's gonna start that application pool up. But there we go. There's a website on our local machine, port 8080. If you wanted to, you could put a hole in your firewall now and have your machine serve this website either on your personal network, on a corporate network, or to the entire world if you wanted to. More likely what you'd do is you would do this deployment on a different machine that's a web server. But the process is the same. You may have FTP access instead of file access. That's okay. I'm not going to have to, I shouldn't have to teach you how to use FTP. Yeah, it's a little confusing sometimes. It has some problems. But that's kind of outside the scope of this video. But essentially, you FTP or copy the file in some way to the folder in IIS wherever your website is pointed to. That's it. So now we've deployed to IIS. See how simple that was? It gets even better if we're deploying to Azure. So let's do that next. So now I've got this publish profile, which if I wanted to republish this, I could just hit publish again. Because it's doing the folder profile, it's going to publish that folder over again. Now, if I had pointed that folder directly to the IIS website, it would publish right into the website and refresh it immediately. I don't recommend that. I kind of like to have a step or two between you publishing in Visual Studio and it being on a live website. Now, if it's a demo site, not a big deal. You can overwrite those. But for anything production, I like to have a couple of steps in between where people actually sign off and say, yes, this is what you want. Otherwise, what happens is you deploy half-done code and your customers actually see it. And that's no good. So let's create a new profile. And this time we're going to create an app service. Now, here's some really cool technology they have built in. Since it's Azure, we can say create new, and it will create right here an Azure app service for this website. It's not created yet in Azure. I hit publish. I select my account. Let's call it I am Tim Corey web demo. That's too long. How about web deploy demo? Notice it's checking name availability. Seems like it's good. So website deploy demo uses my subscription. If you don't have an Azure subscription, that's kind of important in order to deploy to Azure. But they give you some credits for free and some website deployment for free. So definitely check that out. In my video on, I think it's top 10 free tools, I cover Azure and the credits you can get from them and how to get started with that. So check that out. So resource group, we'll use the Simple Help Center one, and the hosting plan is fine. And we'll hit create. Now it's going to deploy. It's going to take a couple of minutes because don't forget, we're not just copying files here. We're actually first creating an entire web app site for us on Azure. So that's kind of step one. Create that whole site, get it all set up, put it on a profile, make sure it's launched and ready, and then deploy our files from there. So it is a few more minutes than the first time than it otherwise would be, but really it's not that long a process. We're actually almost done. So it's moving the files over now, and it's creating the, I believe it's called the access control list. It's the security for the different files. Now, one thing I mentioned while I was doing this is a one-time thing. it's not going to create a website every time you publish, just the first time. After that, it has baked into it the credentials necessary to keep publishing. Now here's our website, which, whoops. Notice that the URL is websitedeploydemo.azurewebsites.net, which, by the way, that'll go away after a little bit. So don't expect it to last forever. I mean, it's not something I keep hosting, but website deploy demo, there's our code that's actually running in the cloud. So in just a couple minutes, we not only deployed our code to Azure, we also built a web app for it first. So that's really all there is to publishing a website. Really simple stuff. Either you deploy as files into a folder, which really, if you look at the IIS or FTP, that's all it's doing. It's just how it copies those files over. Web deploy or file transfer, or FTP essentially. Those are just different methods for transferring the files. So as folder deploy, same thing. App service, really simple. We can create our own, or we can select an existing. If I wanted to, I can create a different published profile here. But now that I have my published profiles, now whenever I want to publish my website, I can just hit the publish button here. Now I can also set up continuous delivery, which will, every time I make a change and save it, it will publish it out to Azure. I'm not going to set that up, but you could if you want to. That's a little bit more involved process. It's not much, but it does have a couple more steps there. And it's not something I want to set up for this demo. However, and here's the one thing before you kind of check out and say, okay, that's all I need to know. There is a larger deployment picture option here. And that is, this works great for small websites or websites where you're building demos or building sample applications and trying things out. However, once you get to the point where you have a website that you're going to deploy to production, and by production, I mean somebody other than yourself is going to use it in a real capacity. At that point, these methods here aren't good enough, in my opinion. And the reason why is because these don't have any checks and balances in the process. So instead, what you want to do is set up a continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline where you are, will first of all have this committed to source control like Git, and then you push the changes to a server, and then on certain commits, you then have it built automatically, you have tests run against it, and then you push to the cloud. Now I'm going to create a series at some point soon on actually doing that whole process, because that's an important process, but it's not a quick process. It's not a process that you do, that you teach in just an hour. It's more than that, because there's so much involved in it, from learning Git to learning continuous integration, continuous deployment, your build server and build definitions and all the rest. But that's an important process to put in place anytime you have a production application. And the reason why is because then you can have gates in the process where you stop and say, is this what we want? This right here does not have any gates. As soon as I push publish, it goes to the website. For a production website, I prefer to see it go, when I commit my code or save my code, I'd prefer to see it go to a dev site or development site where, yes, you can see your code. Yes, it's on a live website, but maybe not live for your customers, just live for you internally. And then you test to make sure it's working the way you expect it to. And you try things out and try the features you just built and make sure they work the way you intend them to. And then you take that exact same build and you move it on to a staging server to test it one last time. And then you move those changes over to production. And that way you have this process where nothing hits production until it's been thoroughly tested and you're exactly sure of what's going on and all the rest. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that this process that I've taught you today isn't something that you want to do for a production website. But as you're building, as you're testing, as you're doing small applications where it's just a quick little website, yes, this works great. So just to recap, we have folder publish, which then we just put into the folder of our web server, or we have Azure publish, which just points to a web app and we hit publish, and that's really it. Okay, so that's how you deploy a website. Now, yes, we're not deploying desktop applications. That's a separate animal. There's going to be a separate video on that. But this showed you how to publish .NET Framework applications to a server very quickly. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer them. And if it's a more involved answer, I'll put in a list for a future video. Okay, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.